Joining us today is Llew Pritchard, Business Development Manager at IPP Consulting. He'll be speaking at IIR's Queensland Gas Assets and Pipeline Infrastructure Conference, which takes place on the 30th to 31st of March 2011 in Brisbane. Hello Llew, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
First of all, what are the main security risks for resources companies when developing projects, such as those being undertaken throughout Queensland?
What I find the fundamental issue is that a lot of resource companies won't plan or won't conduct a security risk assessment at the beginning to identify the threats to the organisation, and from then on you can mitigate them. So the major threats to industry vary from state to state, from industry to industry, but in Australia there are various intelligence groups which highlight the consistent threats. For example, water and power have a consistent threat of insider threat, like disgruntled employees who may cause problems with your SCADA systems, and they can really tangle with your facility operation systems on site, remotely and on site. It's something that's often forgotten about. That's probably a consistent one at the moment. The other one in terms of coal seam mining is it's a hot topic because of the fact that taking a product out of the ground and issue motivated groups or green activist groups like Friends of the Earth and similar organisations. They have another organisation called 6 Degrees, and they're very hot on the topic of anything to do with coal seam mining. They do protest peacefully, however they will they do have that potential to cause disruption. And on occasions they will take physical actions by chaining themselves to a fence or a conveyor belt, or just basically disrupting your operations. That's probably the main threat, because most of the energy resources are in remote areas in Queensland, and it takes a fairly planned and resourceful group to come to the site. So what we're finding now is there could be more of a risk on the cyber side of things, and people are getting smarter at disrupting you by going through information technology rather than attending the site physically. They can impact you with little disruption to them, and they can cause you major disruption while it's great to them.
And how can you deal with those motivated groups you mentioned?
Well, what I do, I engage with them, James. I think it's something that I've identified with another energy company before, is that best off knowing what your enemy is and having a bit of a talk around the table and saying, look, let's talk about this from purely a health and safety perspective first and foremost, because they do care about their people. Whilst they do protest what you are doing for a business, they're very keen to look after their people. They have safety plans, they have security plans, they do all sorts of training for their members, and they're very keen not to put anyone in harm's way. I've tried that tact. I've talked to Friends of the Earth and I've discussed with them about it, and I said, look, why don't you sit down with the key stakeholders and just rule out areas where you should and should not go in terms of health and safety, because you could walk across a coal stack, which is incredibly dangerous, and you might have members who aren't aware of that. So those sorts of things you can rule out. You can at least mitigate some of that. In terms of your information technology or cyber security, there are cyber security and SCADA security, what we call them specialists or technicians. There's a number of those guys who are running test programs at the moment, and they're tightening up the systems as we speak. If I can go to a given site or an energy or water company and I can find the very basics of information security is just not being adhered to by company employees. For example, passwords being written and taped underneath keyboards, PIN numbers for alarm systems to get into server rooms written on the wall right next to the alarm panel. Basic things like that. A consultant like me can go out to the site and say, what are you doing this for? So, it's something we've always done. It's sort of something that has to be pushed down from executive level. It's much like business resilience. Nobody's going to pick that up as an organisation unless the chairman forces it down. And you really need that senior executive to implement the policies of the company. Basic things like, localised security, keeping your information secure, your passwords and your keyboards and your server room secure, should be done just as a matter of business. But you find, because I think they're in such a remote area that they don't have to worry about it.
Llew Pritchard, many thanks for your time.
Thanks, James.